it started with just me, and then I got an email from Thomas who said I can do social media. And Thomas is a college student, so our first volunteer and our first social media manager was Thomas. And then Caroline wrote me and had a lot of helpful suggestions. So I said, okay, you can be co-chair. And in retrospect, I think it was insane to hand over the keys so quickly, but we had no idea how big it would become.
So I initially started out as just a moderator on the Facebook public page, and then I jumped in and helped with the diversity committee, as well as with our crafting of our mission, vision, principles, and goals. And after a few days, Jonathan and Caroline, the two March for Science co-chairs in the beginning, interviewed me along with several other people, and then invited me to be their third and fellow co-chair.
So Caroline came on as co-chair, and then we started trying to put together a steering committee for when we disagreed, we could take problems to them. And then we organized various committees to do certain tasks. So there's the website tech committee, and then there's the social media team, and then there's the team writing mission statements and writing copy for us, and then there's a communications team. And so there was this sort of constant turnover, because when you organize a big event like this, it's really easy to become burned out or tired or get into arguments. So we were sort of constantly filling positions or losing people or gaining new people and trying to keep things together.
Since basically the end of January, I've been involved with March for Science on this national co-chair role and position, and helping with the organization and the building of the committees, and figuring out what activities and how this march was going to play out, and organizing parts of the rally in DC.
I've been doing grassroots work for the last 2 years for the university. Cornell, when they found out about the March for Science, we felt that we were really in line with their values and their mission. So the university seconded me to the event as a donation towards the effort. So about a month ago, I met Caroline Weinberg, the founder and one of the co-chairs, and I joined the team officially as a member of the communications effort.
I'm a research scientist at the University of South Florida. But over the course of the last few years, I've also been running an outreach organization called Scientists, Inc. So we're working on trying to bridge the gap between what scientists do and what the public understand about what we do. It just so happened that when we mentioned that we would like to be official partners with the march, they all said, oh, actually, we've already been talking to the city coordinators here, and they said, oh, they really like our project and they would like to help us promote our events in return for helping them with their logistics.
I don't tell the other organizers how old I am, but I think on average I'm 15 years older than all of the co-chairs, and I find that sort of youth energy and that millennial attitude towards organizing very interesting.
January 20th. It was that was when I first started doing anything for it. And then once things took off, the formal organization, March for Science, didn't form until January 24th. I don't consider myself to be an activist. I am a scientist who has found himself in the unfortunate situation of needing to be active. After the march took off, we had suddenly hundreds of thousands of people, and every one of them wanted to know where to show up and when. And so we were under a lot of pressure to pick a day and pick a time. And the two biggest suggestions to us were Pi Day, which was March 14th, and Earth Day, which was April 22nd. And Earth Day Network, who were the people who put on Earth Day stuff, had written to us saying, we already have permits for April 22nd, would you be willing to work with us? So we had sort of a contentious debate about it, because we need to be very nonpartisan, and Earth Day Network has a history of partisanship. So we sort of formed, and this was in the first few days, an AirSat steering committee, and adopted Robert's Rules of Order, and had a debate, and eventually we voted to go ahead with Earth Day.
So the March for Science, we realized that their message is so inherent to our own mission that we felt that we had to do something to work with them, and so we became official partners.
In like traditional organizing, there's a certain protocol or a way of working, which usually involve, flying to different locations, meeting in large gathering halls, having very structured, organized programs, and then you listen to talk after talk after talk. That's the traditional method of communications and organizing. Whereas this relied very heavily on new technologies and social media to keep the momentum going. So not only to get new people involved in the movement, but we were using all of these social media technologies to stay in touch with each other.
We are a very kind of virtual organization. So while people have really good working relationships, the majority of them have never met each other. So we have this wonderful app called Slack, which is quite popular these days for communication. And as a result of that, we do, like I say, there's very little traveling that takes place between the cities otherwise.
A second thing that I noticed while working with this team is that when they did need to congregate, they would use public workspaces. So they used the WeWork system here in Washington, D.C., which is a space set up for young entrepreneurs to be able to gather and work and perhaps meet other entrepreneurs. So when I came to DC, I was invited to the space to see them working on the last minute details, and it was an amazing experience. I'd never been to a place like that. I'm used to working in traditional offices, only surrounded by colleagues, in some sense, people that I already know who they are and what they're doing, whereas this actually allowed for so much more innovation because of how almost random it was, but just having coffee next to someone who's working on an entirely different business, and that conversation you can have can lead to so many new things. And so again, that's another way it changed my mentality about how people should connect, how grassroots organizing should be done, and how we can use new technologies to help further that.
I've had other experiences before, but wearing different hats. So when I was an undergraduate, I was initially a journalism major, and so for my college campus paper, I covered the United for Peace and Justice rally in New York City against the war in Iraq. And I have also done community building efforts and helping to create mentoring programs for remote villages in Alaska. And I've been a volunteer with AmeriCorps. And so I've done different things to advocate and to help build better communities, but I've never done anything on this scale, and I've never thought that science needed so much advocacy until lately.
So the first meeting was, there was like I think there were 100 people, and it was a mix of grad students and professors, a couple undergrads. And right now it's kind of a lot, mostly sustained by graduate student work. There's undergrads involved as well, but I think a lot of the people who are really engaged and committed to this are grad students, and we've split into 3 groups focused on science outreach, science advocacy and policy, and then inclusion and diversity within the sciences. I didn't step up to take any titled leadership positions within the organization. I am also involved in a lot of environmental activism groups on campus, and in 2014 we went to the Climate March in New York City, and I wasn't part of organizing that, but I went to it, and that kind of is what got me involved with activism in that sense. And so when the Climate March came out, which is the weekend after, I was like, oh, we need to go to that. We need to get students to go to that. And then there was the science march. And originally they were going to be together. And so we started the conversation together. It's like, okay, now all of the environmental clubs need to work with the science groups to plan the march. And then they split into 2 different weekends. And so it's like, okay, we sent out an initial poll to everyone to figure out where there was interest. And there was a lot of interest in both. So we just decided to plan both marches. And since I was involved in both organizations and I seemed to be the one behind the march organization, I worked with the bus company and booked the buses, and yeah, that just kind of got me on the team planning this. It wasn't a specific role. I guess I just showed up and said I was going to do something and did it. So it's not really well organized and it's kind of random, and there's criticism to that because some of these efforts are redundant, but people just decide they want to do something and then just do it. Helen and Virginia are the people who started the organization, and they're looking to make it a nonprofit, and so there's a lot of discussion on where we should really go with this, whether it should be a student organization or whether it should be separate from the university. Also, I mean, as you guys ran into the problem, they're concerned with the image of this organization because they don't want to make it too political. They don't want to be misrepresented because that's a big concern, because they want to be inclusive and they want to be seen in a certain way so that we can, as scientists, be taken seriously. Well, one of the signs at the Women's March that someone was holding was saying, like, this, I don't remember the exact wording, but like, it's so bad that even the librarians are marching, was what the sign said. And talking with my family about the march as well, and my parents, who are both professional scientists, that the message that they want to send is that the situation where scientific fact is not considered or not believed is so dire that even the scientists are willing to engage to this extent to prove that they really do care about the rest of society, and that it is really important that we take science seriously. But then there's the conflict with being seen as a lobbying group, because we do want to be seen as outside of the political situation and not having a stance on that sense. So okay. I don't have any friends who support Trump. Like, I see myself as a scientist, and I want to be a scientist to help people, and that is my underlying goal. I think instead of us being like elite people in society, we're trying to serve people just as anyone else is trying to do in society.
Yeah, so we have 55 people on a bus, and we're going 3 buses going down.
So you guys just like, you get off and then you just start marching? Like, what is the protocol to do?
We're going to, well, we're not telling people what to do. People can do whatever they want.
Do you have to do like waiver forms and things? Or
Yeah, we have waiver forms, but like we don't really know what we're doing. Like, they're just in case. Like, because we're not good, we just don't want to get sued, but it's not part of, the university actually wouldn't give us money because it's considered lobbying.
Entirely private.
Yeah. Well, student clubs gave us money, so
Oh,
I guess it's not considered university funding. We have 14 dozen donuts that we have to pick up before tomorrow, and we're just gonna go through the bus list and see if we have everyone's phone numbers and make sure we're ready with everybody's contact information tomorrow. And then there's forms that everyone has to fill out, so we have to go through and see who still needs to fill those out. But hopefully it's not too much work, since we have to get up so early. Get up in the morning and then head over to the bus station, and then we'll check people in as they get on the bus and then make sure we have the forms and their phone numbers. And then when we get to DC, we will let people off the bus, and I'm gonna go to the AGU breakfast, which is the American Geophysical Union. They're having a get-together before the march, and that's where I'll meet my family and my other people who are also going down to the march, and then we'll walk over to the mall together. From there, I don't really know what the plan is. I know we will meet back up for the bus, but at 4:30. I'm marching because I think that it's absurd that scientific fact isn't taken as fact, and especially climate change is a scientific fact, and we should act upon it knowing that it is a fact rather than debating whether or not it exists or not, or is happening. I mean, I'm upset by Trump and a lot of things, the fact like that he went on the campaign trail and said that climate change is a hoax created by China. But I also see the need to make this non-partisan and not necessarily against Trump. It's for science. So, I mean, I don't know. Personally, my sign's not going to say anything against Trump, but he's definitely brought this as an issue.
In my own social environment, most people agree with me politically, but in Pennsylvania, it's really interesting. If you drive just a little bit outside of State College, you'll run into Trump signs that are still up. Penn State is interesting because you have a bunch of professors and college students living in the middle of central Pennsylvania, where you're surrounded by a lot of rural farmers, and so we have extremely different views on the world, that they don't have the opportunity to travel and to experience other parts of the world. We think about the world in different ways because at Penn State we teach people to consider the global implications, and we're thinking about these large problems and how they affect other people. It definitely feels like there is a very big divide.
I don't want to show my signs. I want to save them, but this is not the point. Oh, you're here too. You're all here.
Everybody come to have a real good time. Oh, yeah. Let's get together and have a funky good time. 1, 2, 3, hey.
Greetings, greetings, fellow citizens. We are marching today to remind people everywhere, our lawmakers especially, of the significance of science.
Question number one, do you understand that the Earth is round and orbits around the sun?
We're gathered here today to defend this fundamental principle, to tell our elected leaders that attacking science is attacking democracy.
Do you understand that gravity actually is exerting its physical pull on all of us and on everything on the surface of the Earth?
Denying science is denying democracy.
Question number three, do you understand that climate change is already upon us? And that if we do not do something about it, it is only going to get worse for everyone.
Science! Science! I want you all to give yourself a big round of applause for staying with us through this rain. I can still see people streaming into the mall. It's incredible. And we are just about to march for science.
Free up, free up, stand up for the truth. Truth will set you free, baby. Woo! Break it down. We gotta make a difference in this world, everybody. We are powerful in numbers. All of you guys matter. Us coming together is what's gonna make that change.
Revolution. Collusion. It's crazy. The war between our nations.
Science is objective, but it's not neutral. As scientists, as human beings, our mandate is clear. It's for each of us to stand up for what we know to be true.
It's really cool to be here. It's also pretty rainy and wet, so that's not the best, but it's fun to see this many people out supporting science. It's cool to see all of my friends here as well. It feels good to be part of such a big movement. It's not as crowded as the Women's March, which is a good thing for me. I like my personal space. It's too bad that it's raining, but it's cool. It's cool to hear all the speakers. I didn't expect there to be music and a live band, so that's cool.
This is our last speaker set coming up. And to lead off the set, we have one of the pioneers, a pioneering climate scientist, Professor Michael Mann from Penn State University.
And so here we are at a crossroads. Never before have we witnessed science under the kind of assault it is right now.
What impact will have this march?
I think it shows that a lot of people care and are supporting science and are upset with the way our current administration deals with science and the lack of science in policy. And I think it's also empowering for the people who are here to take this energy home and make a difference within their own education or within their own community.
One and two. Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 years old. Boy, 1 and 2.
Patriots indeed are being brought in, and many will soon be a part of our government, helping us to make America great again. My agenda will be based on a simple core principle: putting America first. Whether it's producing steel, building cars, or curing disease, I want the next generation of production and innovation to happen right here on our great homeland, America.
How do you feel now today, one day after the march?
Oh my goodness. Besides, I think you can tell this isn't how my normal voice sounds like. So I'm pretty exhausted. I would love to take a nap, but the work is never ending. And in one sense, this entire experience has felt like a bucket brigade and a relay race and a marathon all at the same time. And for the last 3 months, for another kind of bad analogy, I have felt like I've been drinking from a fire hose while building and flying a plane at the same time. I can sleep.
And we decided that 2 of us was not a good number because if we ever disagreed, we couldn't reach a quick decision. So we needed a third person, and Valerie had been on the social media team. And so we reviewed CVs and we picked hers and we asked her to be a co-chair.
Science doesn't live apart from the rest of humanity. And so I felt personally a deep obligation to put myself in this role. And even before the March for Science phenomenon erupted, I was already at a crossroads personally in thinking about pivoting from the research trajectory that I was pursuing, going into a tenure track position possibly, and staying in academia, and thinking about pivoting toward more community outreach and advocacy work. And so this just bridged that beautifully, and I just happened to be there when it happened.
So we have 150 volunteers, and as I understand it, the majority of them that could attend the march did. And we have our mailing list of people who regularly attend our events and the scientist speakers who come out to participate in the festival. And from our understanding, certainly the scientists participating, they also took part in the march, and we also encouraged the people who'd been to our events before.
So we have a lot of audiences that we're juggling. We have our partnering organizations, which we have hundreds that represent global communities. And then we have all of our thousands of satellite organizers around the world from 600 plus cities. And we also have all the marchers that participated. And everybody has different reasons for why they went out and what they want to see going forward. And so we want to keep listening and engaging in that conversation with all of these components.
Die Daten, die wir nutzen, für alle verfügbar sein. Ethische Regeln guten wissenschaftlichen Arbeitens müssen wir einhalten. Sie dürfen nicht zur parteilichen Disposition stehen. So kann die sozialwissenschaftliche Forschung nicht nur die nötigen Diagnosen stellen, sondern auch Wege aufzeigen, diese Verhältnisse zu heilen. Ich danke Ihnen sehr.
When I say science, you say rocks. Science! Science!
So the costs to us were, I believe the final budget was close to 1.8 million. So we raised money mostly through selling T-shirts, next through direct donations, and then we raised some through donations from partner organizations.
I was handling all of the press inquiries from around the world to speak to organizers, to speak to scientists, to speak to those who are working on this effort. I was also involved in the press effort for the march yesterday. Behind the stage of the event, there was a press tent where we were pairing speakers with the world press. And so I was one of the organizers of the press tent as well.
Initially, the media was very skeptical, and we had to fight for a long time to prove ourselves and build our credibility and try and control our message. And I think for the most part, we were successful. there were a few things that went wrong, but mostly it went right. And the press coverage yesterday and today has so far been very positive that I've seen.
There was at first very slow and small press interest in the event, but in the time leading up to the march, the press interest built more strongly. And I think a lot of the questions that we were getting originally was stemmed around issues of internal organizations, so like issues of, is your team diverse? Is your team representative of scientists around the world? Questions like that. But then over time, then it became more, I thought, focused on the impact that this event could have on people and on the future, and the sort of relationships that are being built and what's going to come out of it. And so I was happy to see that progression. A lot of the questions we were getting were focused on numbers and crowds, and these were topics that we wanted to steer away from because we didn't want the success of this event to be defined by the number of people who show up at the rallies.
We don't have a final crowd estimate yet, but there were tens of thousands of people there. You can look out as far as you could see people.
As you know, yesterday it rained tremendously, and although we are proud of, I haven't heard any estimates yet, so I'm not sure how many people actually showed up. But from my perspective, to be standing there on the stage and seeing the sea of people there in the pouring rain showed me success immediately. Like, I didn't even need to know how many people were there. I do know if it were a sunny day, that number could have been doubled or tripled or quadrupled. I'm very happy that so much of the world press from so many different areas of interest were involved in this. So we had MTV Networks, it's about the youth culture and music and pop culture. We had the PBS NewsHour, which in our country is as sort of serious and conservative and a type of outlet that you can get. We have to say that we are satisfied with the press success, and we hope it continues. We do rely on the press. We need the press, to say the truth, good or bad, about what we're doing, so that others can, stay informed and get involved, help when they can, and help us keep the momentum up. We were actually on the cover of the Washington Post this morning, so I got my morning newspaper, and there we were. There was the organizing team with the banner that led the March of Science, a success, and speaking very positively about the event. And that's the message that we wanted to give.
Well, there are a number of chronic trends in our society that have been around for decades. There's been declining funding for research. It's becoming more and more difficult to get grants. And social media has led to these echo chambers where you only talk to people who already agree with you. And this has allowed science denialism and pseudoscience to threaten to become a part of our government. And that was extremely troubling to me. And in the new current government, a few actions were taken that were extremely acutely troubling because they threatened to damage some of the underlying principles that make science what it is, which are the free exchange of ideas, the ability to publish your results, and the ability to publish results that are politically unpopular.
We want to be able to put anyone's feet to the fire who ignores or skews science or undermines the scientific enterprise.
I think the policies that the current government is trying to implement really jar with my personal beliefs as to what a society should have in terms of infrastructure, in terms of, obviously my personal beef is the science funding and using evidence to make sure that that's what policy is based on.
It's not that there was any one thing, it was a number of disturbing trends that sort of led me to be very worried. And then, especially with the hiring freeze and some of the imposed language changes to the EPA, that made it clear to me that science was in danger. Hundreds of people had this idea and wanted to make it happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had that rapid initial growth. And this isn't a scientific discovery we've made, but this is a change in the culture of science, where a lot of, especially younger scientists, are now willing to be more vocal activists and more vocal defenders of science. So we were more of a fulcrum for that to happen.
Really, I'm sure you'll hear many people say that scientists do not do this kind of thing. They are generally a very introverted population. They like to put their head down and do their research and get their grants and publish their papers. But the fact that they've come away from the labs, and certain scientists are overtly political, for example, Michael Eisen, who is actually standing for Senate, I would say that that's a fairly big step in mobilizing people. If you want to call that success, it depends on your personal opinion, but I would say so.
Science is beyond Republican or Democrat. We need people from all political parties and all political ideologies to be involved in our movement to bring science forward. So by focusing on Trump and focusing on whether or not we are against the president, it's not the right way to direct this conversation. So actually, I never felt that it's protesting on the street is the best way to be politically active or to have your voice heard. I like to do things sort of from the inside. That's always been my attitude. I've worked in many big organizations. So I was at NATO before Cornell, and I worked at large media organizations before that. I've worked in UN offices, and I believe in change from within.
We were very clear from the beginning that this is political because we're discussing policy, and there are policy changes we want. But it can't be partisan. We decided we couldn't be partisan, meaning we couldn't favor either of the two major political parties in the US or any of the other parties. We couldn't speak about politicians. We had to speak only about policies. And where that becomes contentious, it was not with the leadership team, it was with activists. Because I'm a scientist, Valerie is a scientist, Caroline is an applied scientist, she's an MD, and so we're not used to working in the activist realm. And activists are used to marches and demonstrations with a very wide tent that allows people to bring whatever issue to the table they want. And that's not something we could do. First of all, because other large protest movements in the United States have failed for that reason. The Occupy demonstrations about 5 or 6 years ago being a prime example of having too many issues brought forth that people want to focus on, and that would be very damaging to us. And a lot of the experienced activists did not want us to be in charge because we were unwilling to make the march about minimum wage. We were unwilling to make it about whatever other issue they felt a March for Science could encompass. The delicacy of trying to work with activists who want a broad tent and work with scientists who want a narrow tent has been a challenge.
In my own immediate family, we split different ways in our political actions recently, and then I spent Thanksgiving with them, and that was awkward. It doesn't, to me, change our relationship. Although in some social media groups that I've been in, I have seen stories of people having really severe conflicts with family members and spouses over politics. That didn't happen to me personally, even though we were divided also.
It's not due to the current administration that we started our outreach activities. I mean, obviously, we started 4 years ago, at which point President Obama was still in power. So for us, it's more we're trying to tackle the misinformation that comes out largely through social media. At least that's my personal feeling. I haven't seen any data on it. But the fact that you have poorly written stories, you have deliberately negatively written stories, you have ones that are peddling false information, and this is the kind of thing that we were trying to combat. So while we are not inherently political, obviously this would have some political impact if people are considering these things when they go to vote. The way this march has come about due to a particular administration. And so unfortunately it's going to be tied in with what that administration is doing. So it might look like it is partisan. I don't think, for me, it's inherently a political thing. I believe that you need to speak up, and for us it's to say that we should be considering the truth. We should not be suppressing people's their data, their research, what they're trying to tell the public. I myself want to, I mean, it's selfish, right? I want to protect my profession. I want to make sure that the work I do is meaningful to people.
The important thing is moving forward what happens. Now people have marched, they have demonstrated that they care about science, and they have become invested in the process. And how do we leverage that investment into getting people to take more actions? So that's what we're working on now. It's the next day, and we're already at work making that happen.
Today we let it go a little bit easy because it's Sunday, and yesterday everybody got pretty beat from a really long day of amazing activities. So today's theme is Science Engages, and the message being that a movement in motion stays in motion, and we want to symbolically keep marching.
So this week we're doing a week of science action. So partner organizations have, I think we have about 3 a day things you can do for science. For example, Secular Coalition for America and Voices for Vaccines are working on a webinar to train people how to call the representatives to talk about non-medical vaccine exemptions.
You know, yesterday, April 22, the march has ended, but today the movement begins.
Every day this week you can go to our website and find something to do. And then moving forward, we have a lot of projects that are coming up. For example, I've been working on a journal of science activism, which is going to be a scholarly scientific journal where people can publish studies related to the kind of activism that we did here.
We definitely didn't want to end the march and then have people wondering, well, what's next? Is there anything that we can do? We want to channel all that energy and momentum into keeping people as engaged as possible. So this week of action is just one step toward what will hopefully be a really long-lasting role of science advocacy.
Science is my mother.